Hey everyone, Teo here. This is my review for the Xppen Ultra 16 pen display with 4K UHD OLED and touch screen support. First of all, disclaimer, this is a review unit provided by the company, and in this video I'll just present to you my findings so that you can decide whether this is worth the money. Official retail price for this pen display as listed on their website is $899 US, and right now at the time of review it's $810 US, and there is an 18-month warranty and there is free shipping, I believe, to certain or selected countries. So this is definitely a pricey pen display. I'm not sure if you remember, but a few years ago, back in 2021, Xpen actually released a 16-inch pen display, the Artist Pro 16 TP, which also has 4K UHD resolution, and this also has touch support. So this is also selling at $899 US, but the Artist Ultra 16 now has an OLED display and the pen performance is noticeably better. This video review you are watching is going to be extremely long because there is a lot to cover. So if you want to save time, you can actually check out the text review that I have already written on my blog. The link is in the video description below, or you can use the timestamps provided to jump to different sections of this video. And do me a favor, if you have the intention to buy this pen display after watching my review, consider using the affiliate links that I have in the video description below to support my YouTube channel, which will help me put out more detailed reviews like the one you're watching right now. Alright, as usual, let me give you the bottom line up front. This is a beautiful pen display. It's brighter compared to many Xpen pen displays that I have tested over the past few years. It's sharp with 4K UHD resolution, and the color accuracy is fantastic because it's an OLED display and it's also color calibrated at the factory. Just note that OLED displays have pulse wave modulation, so people with sensitive eyes may be affected by PWM, which I personally cannot see in real life. If you have to color calibrate this display manually, the data color spider calibrators do not work with OLED displays, but the Calibrite calibrators do. This matte glass surface is noticeably smoother compared to matte screen protectors, so it's going to take some time to get used to drawing on this. But the advantage here is this is very unlikely to scratch, so this surface is more durable. The anti-glare is quite effective, and the display is bright enough to go through the anti-glare, and it is possible to power this display to maximum 100% brightness with a single USB-C video connection if your computer can provide enough power. Touch support and palm rejection work quite well with most drawing apps on Windows because many of those apps have been designed to work with touch screens many years ago. So you will be able to use gestures like zoom, pan, and rotate, and you can use all gestures together at the same time. Many drawing apps on Mac do not have palm rejection because those apps were never designed to work with touch screens. For example, with Clip Studio Paint, this is version 2 on Mac OS. There is no palm rejection, so if I rest my palm on the display, things like this can happen. If I try to draw with my finger, things like this can happen. Touch is supported, though I can zoom, I can rotate, but for some reason, I cannot pan. Not all finger gestures are supported by all the drawing apps on Mac. One thing that I really cannot get used to with touch support for drawing apps on Mac is when you pan the canvas like this, the canvas will not track directly underneath your finger. You see, with Windows, when you pan the canvas or your artwork, the canvas will track directly beneath the fingertips. And also when you zoom and rotate, the pivot point is usually between your fingers. So if I zoom or rotate here, it's going to zoom and rotate around the pivot point here. On a Mac, the pivot point may not be between the fingers. So for example, if I want to zoom or rotate from the face here, let me try and zoom here. It actually works. If I want to zoom and rotate from the face here, okay, it works. Let's try here, and now it no longer zooms and rotates from the pivot point here. So touch support is not consistent with Mac, and you have to remember those inconsistencies so that you can work around them. Now when it comes to browsing web pages on a Mac, you have to use 2 fingers instead of 1 to scroll the web page, which is not an issue because this is something you can get used to. But the scrolling actually feels better on Windows than on a Mac. And if you want to select text on Windows, you tap and hold, but on the Mac you just click and drag, which is actually what I do not want, because sometimes when my hand is on the display, it would just select text when I don't want to select text. Now if you use the pen on a web page, this will also select text. If you do the same thing on Windows, it will just let you scroll the web page. So if you want better touch support, or you want palm rejection to work better on a Mac, you may have to wear the artist glove that's provided, or just disable touch with the shortcut button up here. This display comes with 2 pens, the X3 Pro pen, which is the thicker pen, and there is another slimmer pen. And the pen performance is fantastic because the pressure support is fantastic. Even with a thick brush selected, you can draw thin lines very easily, and you can get the lines to taper very smoothly, very sharply, naturally. So the overall drawing experience with this pen display is very good, very predictable. There is also this ACK05 shortcut remote, which I guess is useful if you are someone who uses shortcut remotes. So the main selling features for this pen display to me would be the quality of the OLED display, the color accuracy, the brightness, the sharpness, and the pen performance. Having touch is a nice bonus. It's nice to have, but to me it's not that necessary since I'm someone who prefers to use keyboard shortcuts. So those are the main pros and cons, and the bottom line is this is a good pen display, just note the limitations. Alright, let's move on to the full review. Let's take a look at the items included with the purchase. This is how the packaging box looks. Let me take out everything first. So this is the color calibration report. The pen display has already been color calibrated at the factory, which is nice. And everything is very neatly and safely packed in the box. Wow, there are many items in the box. That's a fold-out kickstand that you can stick to the back of the pen display. Quick start guide, warranty info, stickers for the ACK05 shortcut remote, 1 artist glove, microfiber cleaning cloth, interchangeable plugs for the 33-watt USB-C power adapter, and this is a USB-A to USB-C cable, replacement pen tips. This is the pen case, and the cover can close with magnets. And inside there are 2 X3 Pro pens. This is the standard one with the thicker grip and comes with 2 side buttons. And this is the slim pen, also with 2 side buttons. And this can actually be removed and replaced with this cover, which I will show you later. There are 4 extra standard pen nibs, which are made with plastic, and 4 extra felt nibs. And that's the USB-A wireless receiver for the ACK05 shortcut remote. Oh, and that is the pen nib remover. For the data cables, we have 2 USB-C to USB-C video cables, and one of the connector is L-shaped, and they are each 1.5 meter long. And lastly, we have a 2-to-1 cable. This end with the USB-C will go to the pen display, and this end has HDMI, which will go to the computer, and USB-A for data, which will also go to the computer. If your computer only has USB-A ports, you will need to buy a USB-A to USB-C adapter, which is not included. And between the 2 ends, there is this thing in the middle with a USB-C port, so this will connect to power to provide power to the pen display. There are two ways to connect the pen display to your computer, and the first way is to use the USB-C video cable which is provided. If your computer can provide enough power to power the pen display, that is great, so you may not need to connect the other USB-C cable to a power source. But if the pen display is flickering, then you may need to connect the pen display to additional power. And this is the second way, which uses HDMI video connection. So you need to use the 2-to-1 cable that is provided. So the HDMI will go to the computer, the USB-A will go to the computer. There is one USB-C port here in this black box that goes to power, and another cable, the USB-C connector, goes to the pen display. If you have this problem where the pen display will black out when you move the pen near the display, like this could be due to the pen display not having enough power, so you may have to connect additional power to the pen display. And I have just connected this to additional power, so now when the pen is near the display, there is no more blackout. This pen display can actually get video signal from Android devices that can output video. So this is the desktop mode for Samsung tablets, and let me show you finger gestures which work. So this is zoom, I can pan, I can move this around. With the pen, I can also move things around. I can click and drag, but the pen does not work for drawing with some apps. This is Infinite Painter, doesn't work. This app is Concepts, does not work as well. Let's look at Sketchbook. Okay, Sketchbook works, but there is no pressure sensitivity. And this is not pen mode, which is to say that you can draw with your finger and there is no palm rejection. And because you can draw with your finger, that's why the pen can also work. I have also tested the pen display with my Xiaomi tablet, and finger gestures work. The pen works for click and drag, but the pen for some reason cannot click on the apps at the bottom. So to open an app, I have to open the app from the desktop. So this app is Concepts, and same thing, the pen doesn't work for drawing. Let me disable pen mode. Okay, now it works, but there is no pressure sensitivity. Finger gestures work. And can I rotate this? I should be able to rotate this. Yeah, so if you want to draw with the pen, at the time of this review, there is no pressure support. It seems like there is no pressure support for apps from Android devices. Another thing I noticed is I am not able to swipe up to go back to the home screen. So to go to the home screen, I have to swipe up from the tablet. The iPad can connect, but the pen display does not work with finger gestures or the pen. Let's look at the design of the Xppen Ultra 16. This is a beautiful design, which looks clean and simple. The bezels are quite thick, but alright, they give you space to rest your palm by the side, and the wrist rest area is quite big. So this is a 15.6-inch OLED display with 4K UHD resolution. The refresh rate is 60 Hz, and this is also a touch screen. And if you don't want to use the touch screen, you can use this button at the top to disable touch. And having touch is actually quite convenient at times. Cable connection at the top is secure. This does not move when you insert the connector all the way in. So you can use the L-shaped connectors or the straight connectors, in which case the cable will come out like this instead of going up and going to the side. This is the side profile, which is quite thin, thinner than most laptops. The corner here is rounded, but the display is not. And here at the top are buttons for power, brightness control, and touch. This is how the back looks. There are 4 rubber feet, one long one at the top, 2 smaller ones at the corner, and one small round one here. This is matte textured metal. The X that you see here is actually the Xppen X. And if you look really close, you can see some holes inside. One downside here is the back is quite susceptible to fingerprint smudges. If you look here, you can see there are 4 markers. So this is the area where you can stick the kickstand to the back of the pen display. I'm not sure why this kickstand is not built into the back of the pen display and instead it's a separate piece. There is double-side tape for you to stick this to the back of the pen display, and this is made with metal, so the build quality is very solid, and you can fold out the feet like this. You can get 2 angles with the kickstand, and this is the higher angle and this is the lower angle, which is quite low. I prefer to use my own tablet stand instead, which I can adjust easily to different angles. And this tapered end of the pen display slots in really nicely onto the ledge of this tablet stand that I have here, which is the Pablo PR100. If you're using macOS, you may experience some UI scaling issues, and this does not happen with Windows. So 16-inch with 4K resolution is actually a good combo for macOS. But if you find the UI scaling to be too small, for example, the text or the icons are too small for your personal preference, you can try to adjust the resolution or the UI scaling using macOS system settings. The UI options here are limited, so just click here to show all resolution. And when you choose some of these options here, they may make the UI bigger, but the visuals may look softer and not as sharp. So you may need to use another app called Better Display to handle UI scaling if this does not work for you. This is just for Mac users, and I'll put the link to where you can download this in the video description below. With this app, you select High DPI option and you can use the slider to adjust the size of the text and the icons. Let's talk about color quality. So I tried to color calibrate this display using my Data Color Spider X2 color calibrator, and there is this error, which is a common error that I usually get when color calibrating OLED displays, because this does not work with OLED displays. Calibrate color calibrators will work with OLED displays, but these calibrators do not give me the color accuracy readings in numbers and percentage. Anyway, the colors look good out of the box, and this display has already been color calibrated at the factory, so I don't have to worry too much about color accuracy. And also, generally speaking, with OLED displays, the color accuracy is usually quite good. One important thing about OLED displays that you have to know is there is pulse width modulation, or PWM, and people with sensitive eyes may be affected by PWM because the display is actually flickering at this certain frequency, which I personally cannot see, but some people are affected by that frequency, or PWM. I have just adjusted my camera settings to show you the PWM flickering. Can you see it? And here I have the XP Pen Magic drawing pad with LCD, and there is no flickering here because generally speaking, LCDs don't usually have PWM flickering that is noticeable. But if you're not sure whether you are affected by PWM, I highly recommend you go to an electronics shop and look at their OLED displays. Just stand in front of their OLED displays or use their OLED laptops for 10 minutes to half an hour to see whether your eyes feel any fatigue or you feel anything strange. The visuals are indeed quite sharp with the 4K UHD resolution. Now, all matte textured surfaces will introduce some grain, color noise, or anti-glare sparkle, and there is some color noise or anti-glare sparkle on this display. It is actually quite difficult for my camera to record it, to show it to you, but it is definitely there. I can see the color noise or anti-glare sparkle from normal distance away, but it's not distracting to me. And this is not as obvious compared to what you can find on matte screen protectors. This does not affect the sharpness of the visuals. It's not a big issue in my opinion. This display is laminated, so when drawing there is almost no gap between the line and the pen tip. And here you can see a gap because of my camera angle and because there is still some thickness to the glass. Refresh rate of this display is 60 Hz, and I'm not sure why there is a 75 Hz option here. Anyway, when I choose 75 Hz, the resolution will be much lower. Let's look at the color calibration report and see what information we have. So the display has been color calibrated to Adobe RGB color space, and the average delta E is exactly 1. Average delta E is the variance between the input color and the visible output color. So anything less than 2 is good, less than 1 is fantastic, and we have 1. Unfortunately, I cannot measure the maximum brightness of this display because my color calibrator doesn't work with OLED displays. But from what I can see, this display looks pretty bright. And right now, it's actually running at 50% brightness. So let me face the display to my window. So there is a strong light source, and this is how the anti-glare looks. And you can see the display is actually bright enough for what's on the screen to go through the diffuse reflection. So this looks very bright to me, and I don't even need to run this at 100% brightness. I can work with this at 50% brightness, which is already sufficient for me in this bright room environment. If you really need to adjust the color settings, you have to do it with the driver, and this is the Xpen driver. So here you can adjust the brightness, contrast. You can choose from the different color spaces here, sRGB, Adobe RGB, P3, and user. And with user, you can adjust the RGB, and you can also select the color temperature. So for me, I work with print, so I go with Adobe RGB. And certain color spaces will actually lock the settings. The Mac OS driver also has the same settings. And while we are talking about the driver, let's see what else the driver can do. So if for some reason the cursor is not directly beneath the pen tip, you can click here to calibrate the pen to remove cursor misalignment. This is the Windows driver, and I do not see the calibration button here. So with some versions of this driver, the calibration button is actually down there. If the pen has cursor misalignment issues where the cursor is not directly beneath the pen, you will have to calibrate the pen. Once you click on the pen calibration button, there will be 5 crosshairs on the display where you have to click on them to calibrate the cursor to the pen tip. And under work area is where you can set the work area, and you can leave this as default most of the time. One thing I noticed with this pen display is if I disconnect and connect the pen display to my computer, the mapping area will be lost. So right now, the mapping area is actually here, and the cursor can only move within this area. Now this does not happen when you power down your computer or restart your computer. This only happens when you disconnect and connect. So to set the mapping area to full again, just go into the driver and set full screen. So this works again, cursor is here. And let's take a look at the pen. So you can customize 2 pens. Right now I have the X3 Pro pen here, and you can adjust the pressure curve using the preset options here, or you can adjust the curve manually using the 3 control points. So I'm going to set this curve using the preset. You can test the pen here. You can enable or disable pressure, tilt, and there is mouse mode. And with the Windows driver, there is this additional option called Windows Ink, which you may have to enable or disable for troubleshooting if pressure is not working as expected. And this is where you can test the pressure as well. In an earlier version of this driver, on the pen settings page, the correct model of the pen is not automatically selected here. So before you adjust the pressure curve or customize the side buttons, make sure you select the correct pen. Otherwise, the adjustment will not go into or go with the pen. And under this gear icon is where you can save the shortcuts. Let's click here for the drop down. So this is the same driver that you can use to customize the shortcut remote. And this is the ACK05 shortcut remote. You can rotate the shortcut remote to match how you prefer to hold the actual physical shortcut remote. So if you like to hold this vertically, you can just rotate this vertically and set the shortcuts that are available. So there are 10 hotkeys, and to customize the hotkeys, you just tap on the keys. You can input your own keyboard shortcut here, or you can choose from the different mouse control or the modifier keys, and under other are preset shortcuts. So there is show driver panel, switch monitor, precision mode, which will make the cursor move very slowly, brush eraser toggle, the pen eraser toggle, switch roller function, key group switching, set preview or disable, or you can set the hotkey to run or launch an app. To customize the roller, you just click on the roller here and you can customize up to 4 shortcuts. So these are the pre-programmed shortcuts for zoom, changing brush size, scroll and rotate. And if you want to input your own shortcut, you can do so. Just click inside one of these options, click customize, and you can input a keyboard shortcut for the clockwise and anti-clockwise movement. And let me cancel this. To switch between these 4 shortcuts, you can click this button here in the middle. With this driver, it is possible to create shortcuts specific to the apps that you use. For example, if you use Adobe Illustrator very often, you can click here, the plus icon, and select Adobe Illustrator, and click here to select Illustrator, and you can create shortcuts for Illustrator. And if you use Photoshop, same thing, you just click here to add Photoshop and click here to select Photoshop before you create the shortcuts for Photoshop. So the next time you launch Adobe Illustrator, the shortcuts for Illustrator will load automatically. And when you switch over to using Photoshop, shortcuts for Photoshop will load automatically. So this is actually quite convenient. And if you look here at the bottom, you can see there are 4 toggles. These are actually shortcut groups. So for group 1, there are 10 shortcuts. You can create another group of shortcuts. So if you enable group 2, you can create 10 more shortcuts. And if you enable all the groups, you can create up to 40 shortcuts. But it's not exactly 40 because you actually need to set one of the keys to switch between the different groups of shortcuts. In theory, you can set up to 36 shortcuts because there will be 9 shortcuts on one page or one group, and one of the buttons is for switching between the groups. And if you do set so many shortcuts, it's actually not easy to remember all the shortcuts. Whenever you press a hotkey, there will be a label that appears to show you what shortcut you are using. So this applies to all the hotkeys. When you tap here on the little hand icon, you can customize some of the touch features. So there is a button at the top here that allows you to enable or disable touch gestures. And this is where you can customize the area of the display that will react to touch. So by default, you should leave it as default so that you can use touch on the whole display. For basic, this will disable touch except for the floating menu. This is the basic mode, and this is the Xppen floating menu. So with basic mode, touch gestures are disabled, but you can still draw with the pen, and you can only use touch gestures with the floating menu. So you can move this around, or you can use your finger to use the shortcuts. Now if you close this menu, you will not be able to get it back using finger gestures. So you either have to go back to the driver to show the menu again, or I have set this button here to show the floating menu. Now for some reason, this ACK05 shortcut remote cannot be set to show the floating menu. At the time of review, these are the pre-programmed shortcuts that you can assign to the hotkeys on the shortcut remote, and there is no floating menu option here, but there is for the pen button. So this is probably something Xppen can add with a firmware or driver update. And the driver has this customized option where you can set touch to work only on a specific area. This option can help you prevent unintentional or unwanted finger gesture shortcuts. So let me set this to default first to show you what will happen by default if the whole screen reacts to touch. So let's say you're drawing and I'm using Clip Studio Paint here. So there are palettes here by the side and I have different layers. I have the line art layer here. So this is the line art. Now, sometimes when I'm drawing, my hand is on the display and my palm may accidentally activate the layers here, so I may draw on the wrong layer because my finger accidentally touched some of the layers here. So with this option, you can customize, tap here on this little button and set the upper left corner here and the lower left corner here. So this area now will not react to touch. So I can still draw. Let me go back to the line layer. Now I cannot even select the line layer. I have to use my pen. Select the line layer and draw. But if I use my finger, you can see I cannot select the layers. I cannot even touch anything in this area because I have disabled touch here. But I can still use touch here for the main drawing area. So this actually can help you prevent unwanted palm rejection issues. Quite useful. Under basic gestures, this is basically to tell you you can use single finger or double finger shortcuts, and these are controlled by Windows according to this driver. And under advanced feature, you can customize shortcuts for 3, 4 or 5 finger taps. So now when I use 3 fingers, I can open this floating menu and there are 8 shortcuts which are customizable. To customize them, you have to press this settings button here and close the floating window. So you can customize them here, or you can set the floating window to be vertical. Let's go back to the touch screen and you can set shortcuts for 4 fingers, which by default is set to switch monitor, and 5 fingers. Now one thing you have to note here is if the drawing app that you are using also supports 3, 4 or 5 finger taps, that may interfere with the shortcuts here. So you will have to either disable the shortcuts here or with the drawing app, and you can only use one set of shortcuts. Concepts is an app that supports 2, 3 and 4 finger shortcuts, so I can use 2 fingers to undo. I can use 3 fingers to call up the color wheel, but the Xppen driver also supports 3 finger shortcuts, so when I use this shortcut, the floating menu will also appear. So as mentioned earlier, if you want to use either one, you have to disable the other. And I can use 4 fingers as well. In this case, this will hide the UI elements. Let's talk a bit more about the 2 pens. So this is the X3 Pro pen and this is the X3 Pro Slim pen. So I have to remove this cover first before I can take out the pen. This is a replacement cover for the 2 side buttons. So if you do not want to use these 2 buttons, you can just take out the 2 buttons and replace it with this. If you're using the pen display with an Android device, maybe the side buttons are not necessary, but if you're using the pen display with Windows or Mac OS, the side buttons are very necessary. The back of the Slim pen can be opened up and inside you will find a storage area for 4 replacement pen nibs. Speaking of pen nibs, the Slim pen uses the thinner pen nibs and the thicker pen uses the thicker pen nibs. Both pens support tilt 16,000 levels of pressure sensitivity and palm rejection. And for the thicker pen, it comes with this silicone grip, which is quite comfortable to hold. And at the back, there is the eraser. For the Slim pen, there is no eraser at the back. Both pens are not powered by battery, so no charging is required. There is slight movement with the pen tip when in contact with the display, but I would still consider this a firm pen tip. Time for the line test, and the app that I'm using is Medibank Paint, and as you can see, this is able to capture my handwriting quite accurately. Let's look at the latency performance first. So as I draw this long sweeping line, I can see latency. I can see the line trying to catch up with the pen tip. But this is the usual amount of latency for pen displays, and this is not really an issue when drawing. Now for this app, Medibank Paint on Mac OS, as I draw the line, I can see some stutter as the line tries to catch up. So the line will move like this and then stutter slightly before it catches up with the pen tip, and then stutter slightly. This problem does not exist with Clip Studio Paint. Yep, no issues here. This is Sketchbook, and no issues with the line stutter. And this is Affinity Photo, also no issues with line stutter here. Okay, so this is the test for initial activation force and also diagonal line wobble. If you want even thinner lines, you can adjust the pressure curve. Okay, this looks quite straight to me. Let's do the ruler test to see how straight the lines really are. And this is as straight as it can be. Next, let's look at line taper. So this is good because the line can taper smoothly and sharply, and you can use this to create cross hatching. Line transition from thin to thick and back to thin. And this is also a pressure test. And this is also a diagonal line. So if we take a close look, you can see that the diagonal line is quite smooth. And the transition from thin to thick is quite smooth, and I can draw thin lines after drawing the thick lines. There is this weird straight line here that's due to the Medibank Paint software issue. But otherwise, this is actually pretty good pressure performance. Let's see if I can maintain consistent line width by maintaining consistent pressure. No issues here. Let's draw some dots. Small dots, big dots. Sometimes the dots do not appear, but that seldom happens. And next we have the cursor misalignment test, where I will draw separate lines and try to join the lines together by looking at where the pen tip is instead of where the cursor is. So what I'm looking out for is whether there is any, if there are any gaps, and also whether the lines will overshoot when I am joining the lines. For example, here is a gap, but that is due to human error. So I am able to join the lines without gaps and the lines overshooting. And also you can see some variance with the thin and thick lines. So that is due to pressure, and pressure works well with this pen. So the pressure performance is quite good. Let me show you the tilt performance. So this app is Krita, and as I rotate the pen, you can see the cursor follow the direction of the pen. When I hold the pen vertically, this is the line that I can get, and when I tilt the pen at an angle, this is what I can get. So now the darker shade is on the left side. So if I hold the pen with my left hand, I can have the darker shade on the right side. I can have the darker shade at the top or at the bottom, depending on how I hold the pen. So I can have thin lines, broad strokes, thin, broad, and let me just try and draw a circle. Okay, so this is quite smooth. Some pen displays or pen tablets will have some stutter. So the line is not smooth, but it's smooth here. So this is actually pretty good pen tilt performance. Let's talk about touch screen support, which works better with Windows than with Mac OS. So let's start with Windows. Now Windows has touch screen support for a very long time. So gestures such as pan, zoom, and rotate will work with most drawing apps. And you can use pan, zoom, and rotate at the same time. And this is actually quite fluid, very fluid compared to Mac OS. Now, if you are viewing web pages, you can use your finger to scroll web pages. If you use your pen, you can also use your pen to scroll web pages. You can zoom in as well. If you need to select text, you just tap and hold and select text. So this is actually all very basic shortcuts that are supported by Windows. And if you have used Windows tablets or laptops that have touch screens before, the user experience is quite similar. The user experience is actually quite predictable. And there is palm rejection with many of the drawing apps. For example, with Clip Studio Paint, if I try to draw with my finger, you can see nothing happens, but I can use my finger to move the canvas. If I draw with the pen, of course it will draw, but if I have my palm on the display like this, I will not be able to introduce any straight strokes with my finger or palm with Clip Studio Paint. In order to get perfect palm rejection, there are two options. You can wear the artist glove, or you can go into the settings preferences to enable palm rejection. For example, I have disabled use tools with finger. So if this is enabled by default, let's see what will happen. I can draw with my finger, and if my palm is on the display, it may accidentally move the canvas and it may accidentally add straight strokes like this. So you have to disable this or choose some options here to make sure that at least your finger will not add lines unintentionally. There is one setting that allows you to move the canvas with your finger, and I have disabled that as well because I find that sometimes when I am drawing and my palm is resting on the display, sometimes my palm may actually move the canvas unintentionally, so I have disabled everything except for the double finger gestures. So finger gestures and palm rejection work quite well with Windows, but there will still be some occasions where the finger gestures will activate unintentionally. So finger gestures and palm rejection work well, but do not work as well compared to what you can get on iPads and Samsung tablets. And I have to mention Samsung tablets because there are many Android tablets out there in the market, and Samsung tablets have way better palm rejection compared to other Android tablets. Now, if you use Windows, sometimes when you slide, I think with certain versions of Windows, you may be able to slide out some control panels from the left or right, or some widgets from the left or right. You will have to find some way to disable that. So for this laptop behind that I'm using, it does not have that feature, thankfully. Mac OS does not have good support for touch screens on external displays. Some of the basic actions will still work, like click, double click, click and drag. If I want to close this, it's a bit difficult because the buttons are kind of small, smaller than Windows. Okay, third or fourth try to close that. For scrolling web pages, with Windows you use one finger or the pen to scroll web pages, but with Mac OS you have to use two fingers like this to scroll. And to select text, with Windows you tap and hold to select, but with Mac OS you just click and drag to select. Same with the pen. So you will not be able to use the pen to scroll web pages like you can with Windows. You have to use two fingers. If you're using a dual display setup with Windows and the touch screen is not working for some reason, you may have to enable the touch screen through Windows settings. So just do a search for control panel, and once this is up, look for tablet PC settings and tap here, setup. These two options will appear. So here you will be able to set which display will react to pen input and which display will react to touch input. So for example, if this touch screen is not working, I will want to tap here, touch input, and just follow the instructions. So I'm going to press enter to move the screen over here and tap here to identify this as a touch screen. Drawing apps on Windows have better touch support because those drawing apps have been designed to work with touch screens many years ago. But drawing apps on Mac don't work as well because they are not designed to work with touch screens. For example, with this app, Medibank Paint, let me show you pan, zoom, and rotate. So as I pan, notice the visuals do not track beneath the finger. With touchscreen on Windows, iPads, and Android tablets, when you pan, the artwork will track directly beneath the finger. It will not track like this. This is weird. Let's zoom. Zoom works fine. Let's rotate. Rotate seems to work fine. Now I want to place my finger here and rotate the canvas around this pivot point and see if I can do that. Now sometimes when I try to rotate or use touch gestures, it doesn't work as well. It doesn't respond compared to Windows where it would respond more readily. So as I try to rotate here, see where my fingers is and where the rotation pivot is. It's rotating around here, but my fingers are actually here. So if I try to, let's say, zoom in here on the number 16 and try to rotate here, okay, it seems to rotate here, but it's probably because the pivot point happens to be here, not because my fingers are there. If I drag this to the bottom right corner, let me try and drag that. Oops, okay, and rotate here. Yeah, you can see the canvas, first of all, moved somewhere else, and the pivot point is still around here. Yeah, so these are some of the inconsistencies that you will have to remember when you're working with touch screen with Mac OS. For Medibank Paint on Mac OS, there is no palm rejection setting. Palm rejection setting is only available for Medibank Paint on the iPad and Android tablet. So this means you can draw with your finger. When your palm is on the display, you may draw with your palm. And when you are resting your palm while you are drawing, sometimes the canvas may move, may rotate, may zoom. That's all because there is no palm rejection for this app and some other apps. This app is Krita, so let's pan. The visuals do not track beneath the finger. Let's zoom. Zoom works fine. Let's rotate. Rotate works fine. Let's see if I can rotate around the pivot point between my two fingers. Let's rotate from letter A. Can you see the rotation pivot is actually here? At least they show you the rotation pivot, and now the rotation pivot is here. If I place my finger here, the rotation pivot is here. Let me use two fingers like this. Yeah, so at least with Krita, when you have two fingers on the display, they will show you the rotation pivot and you know that the rotation or the zoom will rotate or zoom from the pivot point. But this is not the case with other drawing apps. And I'm not sure whether this app supports palm rejection or not because I don't really use this app. This is Clip Studio Paint on Mac OS. Okay. As I place two fingers on the display, I can see the cursor and that is probably the pivot point. Let me try and rotate. Okay, it works. Let me try and rotate around the top left corner of this artwork. So notice as I use my two fingers to move, it does not move. Yeah, for some reason it does not support two finger panning. So wow, I'm not sure what I want to say here. Okay, let me try and place my two fingers here at the bottom right corner and rotate around. You can see that it's just not working. Yeah, okay, now it works. Yeah, so sometimes when you try to use your finger gestures or shortcuts and it's not working, it's quite frustrating. Yeah, so touch support is just not as good on Mac OS compared to Windows. Let's try, okay, let me go into the settings to see if I can enable palm rejection. So these are the options that I have under touch gestures for CSP version 2 on Mac OS. Not many options. And these are the options that I get with CSP version 2 on Windows under touch gestures. So there are just like more options here with Windows. In other words, there is no palm rejection with CSP version 2 on Mac, but maybe there is with version 4, but I don't have that version. So if you wanted to have good palm rejection with Mac, you have to wear the artist glove that's provided. And here are my other findings for drawing apps on Mac OS. So earlier you saw with CSP version 2, pen does not move. Now with Sketchbook, pen zoom and rotate does not work consistently, so the animation is quite choppy when you try to use finger gestures. Photoshop works fine. For Affinity Photo, pen and rotate works. For some reason, zoom does not work with Affinity Photo. And for Mediabank Paint, pen zoom and rotate works. But as you saw earlier, the pivot point may not be between the fingers. So those issues with touch support for Mac are what I found at the time of review, and hopefully Xppen Pen can improve on touch support for Mac in the future with some driver update. I also want to mention that the touch support with Mac with the Xppen Pen driver that you get here is actually better compared to the touch support with Mac that you can get with the Huion Canvas Pro 19. And now let me draw something quickly while I talk more about the drawing experience. So the first thing I want to say is I actually do not use the ACK05 shortcut remote because with the drawing apps that I use with Windows and Mac OS, I'm just way more productive with a keyboard because while you can configure up to 36 shortcuts with this, you can get unlimited shortcuts with a keyboard. So I prefer to use my keyboard instead. And also, as mentioned earlier, it would be good to set up the touch area. So I'm going to go into the touch area, customize, tap here, and click here and here to make sure that I do not have touch working here. So touch will only work here. So when I rest my hand on the display, my hand will not touch or activate any of the layers or any of the buttons here. So I'm just going to draw some faces that I found on Instagram from this guy, Earth's World. Right, the drawing app that I'm using here is Clip Studio Paint, and let me just sketch some drafting lines very quickly. So this is with minimal pressure. Now the matte textured surface, the matte glass surface is quite smooth. So this will take some time to get used to. This is definitely smoother compared to matte screen protectors. The pen glides on it quite easily. If you want a bit more texture, you can go with the felt nibs, but even with the felt nibs, the texture, the matte glass surface is still quite smooth. And I'm not sure if I like it or dislike it because I'm actually already quite used to drawing on such smooth surfaces, but I wouldn't say it's slippery. When you have your palm on the display, you can still get a good amount of control over the pen, so I don't think the surface smoothness is an issue. Oops. So while I am drawing, please pay attention to whether there are unintentional finger gesture shortcuts like unintentional undos. Some sketching with very light touch. And pen pressure works really well. The brush that I'm using is Bit Husky that I downloaded from Clip Studio's website. So this is how thick the brush is, and I am able to create tapered strokes very easily because this pen is very sensitive and accurate. Or I can press down hard to get thick lines like this. This pen is really sensitive. And when drawing, I do not notice any diagonal line wobble or jitter. The matte glass surface is certainly quite smooth, and this will definitely take some time to get used to. I'm already quite used to drawing on such smooth surfaces, but this is, I would say, not considered slippery, so this is still manageable. So my sketching style or my drawing style is actually mostly sketches because I like urban sketching. I don't really do like elaborate illustrations because they take too much time. So this is the usual style that I use for urban sketching. The pen pressure works really well. Let's see if I can join this line properly. Yes, I can. Let me erase here. Yeah, this is really good pen performance that I see here. Very predictable pen performance. This can definitely be used for creating professional comics, as in the pen quality is good enough for creating professional comics. Let me zoom out. So notice as I zoom in and out, I'm actually using the keyboard shortcut because when I am drawing, I don't want to draw and then switch to zoom and then back to draw, zoom, draw, or pen. I mean, for penning, I can still use my hand with the space bar shortcut. But for zooming in and out, I have to switch from drawing to zooming in and out, which is to me not that productive. So if you use keyboard shortcuts, you can just use the keyboard shortcut to zoom in and out, which does not break your workflow. And that is the main reason why I prefer to use keyboard shortcuts instead of some finger gestures. So finger gesture support is actually nice to have. It's a bonus, but I don't think it's that necessary to have with a pen display that you are going to use with your desktop apps. So far, I have not experienced many unintentional finger gestures, which is great. The sunglasses here look a bit weird, so let me just reduce the size. So let me just erase this. So what I'm going to do now is to try and join the line seamlessly with the same line width and pressure, and this looks okay. Maybe this should be a bit rounder here. Okay, looks fine now, better than earlier. So this should go here. Oops. And I can try and join this line as seamlessly as I possibly can. Okay, this is good. I'm just trying to apply the same pressure as earlier and I am able to join the line seamlessly. Yeah, so far I have not experienced many issues with unintentional undos, but just bear in mind that there may be some unintentional undos. This pen display does not generate much heat, so you can rest your palm on it and draw for long periods of time without feeling discomfort or heat. Oh, another thing that can happen occasionally is when you rest your palm, this pop-up box may appear because I have configured it to show with 3 finger gestures. So sometimes when you rest your palm, oops, it just happened. I didn't even specifically call this up. So this can happen, and whether or not you find this unintentional pop-up appearing to be frustrating will be personal preference. So this floating menu will add 8 more shortcuts in addition to the shortcuts that you can get with the shortcut remote, which can be useful if you use them. Let's see how the lines taper again. See how smooth it tapers and also how it tapers very sharply. This looks very natural. Oh, notice as I zoom in real close, you can see pixelation. So when working with a 4K display, you may want to increase the resolution of your artwork, because when you start zooming in, you will see pixelation really quickly. So all those wallpapers that you have from the past, they are probably going to look pixelated if they are not high-res enough. A 16-inch display is a good size to work with. This is almost like an A4 size paper. So there is still a lot of space for your palettes and your drawing canvas area. I also want to talk about drawing apps that you can install from the Microsoft App Store, such as Concepts, Affinity Photo, Sketchbook, and even Medibank Paint is now available from the Microsoft App Store. So this app that I'm using here is Concepts, and why is it that I cannot zoom? Okay. Remember earlier I said I disabled touch in this area, so I wanted to zoom here, but I cannot. So when I switch different drawing apps, I have to remember that this area does not have touch. If I want to zoom, I have to move my hand closer to the center to zoom or rotate. Okay, let's take a closer look at this sketch. This is just a very simple line art sketch with flat colors. Okay, I also want to, sketch something really quickly here. Just a very quick sketch. Okay, one issue that you may encounter, that you are likely to encounter with Concepts is, oops, do you see the unintentional undo there? Okay, the pressure curve here is a bit, how should I say? It is difficult for me to draw thick lines with Concepts. Yeah, so I have to press down like really hard in order to get the thick lines. If I'm just drawing with minimal pressure or with average pressure, this will be the lines that I get. And the lines are uniform and they have no thin and thick, so there is not much character here. So for Concepts, I actually have to go to the driver to tweak the driver, the pen curve, to maybe something like this. Yeah, so now I can draw more expressive lines with thin and thick strokes more easily. For those drawing apps that you install from the Microsoft App Store, they are actually installed very deep within the program files folder. For example, with Concepts, this app is actually installed in the Windows Apps folder. So if I want to set keyboard shortcuts to this shortcut remote to work with Concepts, I have to tap here to plus to add the app. Concepts is not listed here, so I have to browse and I have to go to that folder. Let me see where that folder is. Open, and there will be this pop-up telling me that I do not have permissions to enter that folder. So I have to go and troubleshoot and see how I can actually go into that folder so that I can add that app here. If I cannot add the app here, I will not be able to configure shortcuts to this. And some of the apps that you can install from the Microsoft App Store, as mentioned earlier, are Krita, Affinity Photo, Medibank Paint. So if you want to use this, you have to install those apps from their website. For example, you can install Krita from Krita's website. You can install Medibank Paint from Medibank's website. But for some Windows Store apps, you can only install them from Microsoft Windows App Store. So yeah, so those apps will be, so setting keyboard shortcuts for those apps are going to be like really difficult, because you have to troubleshoot how to find or where to find the folder for the app to be able to select the folder. Okay, so now that I have adjusted the pressure curve, I can actually draw thin and thick lines quite easily. But the pressure support for this app is actually not as good compared to what Photoshop or other drawing apps. Yeah, so there is some issues with this app with pressure sensitivity. It's just not, the pressure support is just not as good, but it's not because of the pen, it's because of the app. Okay, so now I want to select, let me see if I can, okay, I can actually set this button to select. So this is the lasso, and I can move this here, which is nice. So for this app, you can go into the settings here and select what you want to do with the top click here. I can also set it to, let's see, undo. If I double click, it should undo. Nope, it does not work. So this is only for the right click, which I've set to select. There is a long press. Let's set long press to erase. So long press to erase does not work. So whether you can customize the set buttons again will depend on the drawing apps you use, but at least I can still select. Okay, so let's just draw something really quickly. Sometimes when I'm drawing, I find myself, I find my hand floating on the display rather than resting my hand on the display. So let me just try and make a more conscious effort to rest the hand on the display so that you can see whether or not palm rejection actually works. Palm rejection works quite well with most of the Windows drawing apps. Okay, so I don't really have much complaints with touchscreen support on Windows. Okay, so for this sketch right now, okay, two things happened. I accidentally activated the 3-finger shortcut, which, by the way, is also supported by Concepts. So Concepts, let me show you where that section is. You can configure 2-finger, 3 or 4-finger shortcuts. So let me show you show colors. Okay, so let's say I configured 3-finger to show the color palette with Concepts. So if I do this, okay, why is it undo? Yeah, okay. Remember, this area here is not working with touch, so I have to use my finger here. And if I use 3-finger, it would activate the Xpen shortcut instead of the color palette. The reason why the color palette here shows is because when my hand is here, 2 of my fingers are on the touch area and 1 is on the non-touch area, so it activated the undo. Palm rejection works well for most drawing apps on Windows. Now for this app, if I try to taper the line, you can see it doesn't taper smoothly and sharply. So that's due to the app not having good pressure support. It's not because of the pen. And notice as I move my hand, sometimes it would move the canvas because I have set the touch for single finger to move the canvas. If I want to prevent such movement when I move my palm, I can disable that. But sometimes I find it to be quite convenient sometimes to be able to move the canvas like this. I should probably talk a bit more about the drawing experience on Mac OS as well, and it's just not as good compared to what you can get with Windows, because not all the touch gestures are supported by drawing apps. So for example, with the same file that I was using earlier with Windows, which is now open in Clip Studio Paint on Mac, I cannot pan. I can zoom, I can rotate, but I cannot pan. Yeah. So in this case, it's just better to work with keyboard shortcuts. And also, there is no palm rejection. So if I have my palm on the display, this is going to happen. So if you really want to use touch with Mac OS, I highly recommend you wear the artist glove. But for me, when I'm drawing with Mac OS, I will just press the button here to disable touch. So if I'm buying this pen display to use with Mac OS, the touch support is not a selling point for me. It's, as mentioned earlier, the OLED display quality and the pen performance. Same thing with Mi Bang Paint. Not having palm rejection is going to make the drawing experience really frustrating. So if you want to use this pen display with Mac OS, just disable touch or wear an artist glove. So to conclude, this pen display looks good and has fantastic pen performance. Touch support works more predictably and consistently with Windows than with Mac OS. Alright, thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video. Bye.